Hello, dear friends. Welcome this time again from St. Michael's Church in Antwerp at the beautiful Stevens organ of 1909. Today I want to talk about Franck piece, second chorale by César Franck in B minor. Of course, there is already a lot said about César Franck and his organ music, about his registration, about interpretation, historical background. Many things have been written about it and said about it, and everybody has an opinion about it. So don't take my opinion for granted. It's just an idea I have, which maybe can inspire you to look at this piece in a bit of a different way. Now, first of all, some years ago, I found I bought this actually quite nice edition of César Franck Trois Chorales by Durand, but not just the normal Durand edition, but it says revised and with annotations by Maurice Duruflé. So it's actually an edition by Maurice Duruflé. But on the contrary to, for instance, the edition by Marcel Dupré, which was a lot of adaptations in the text, actually Maurice Duruflé keeps very well to the original notation. He just gives some advice sometimes about small registration things or some here and there some small interpretation things, but he always puts it very delicately between brackets so that you know it's not actually Franck's idea but Duruflé's idea. And I think Duruflé got to this idea because when he played the piece it gave him some ideas, because first of all, of course, people say, yeah, this music is intended, of course, for the Sainte Clotilde Cavé call organ, which was a bit specific and others than other Cavé call organs from this time. So one of the things is he always added the basson haute bois to the foundation stops of the third manual, because it was supposed to be rather soft, this third manual at Sainte Clotilde, because it was placed behind the organs, very much in the back, and the sound came through a kind of system with walls which sent the sound into the church, but in general it was softer than with most organs. So that should be one of the reasons that César Franck always add the basson haute bois to the foundation 8-foot stops on the récit. Now, one of the things is you can wonder, okay, should we also do it like this on other instruments where the récit and the basson haute bois is maybe much more powerful? Well, I think, first of all, you should just be careful not to lose the sound of foundation stops, so that it doesn't sound too much as you're playing on a reed stop. That's my idea. Now, there are so many interpretations, and one of the interpretations I kind of like, and probably maybe you also, is you probably know the recording made of this, of the Franck works by Jeanne de Messieux. She recorded them, of course she has different recordings of them, but one of them is at La Madeleine Church, where she was organist. Now you hear clearly in her recording that she doesn't use the basson haute bois. In the beginning, she just used foundation stops. And it's actually a nice idea. Also, I think in general it fits well with the character of the piece. Not to use a reed stop with the foundation stops. Maybe in Sainte Clotilde it will work because it was intended for there. But on other instruments, I think it can be nice just to sound with foundation stops. Now there's another big thing, and that is, we all know this passage where Franck asked to add the reed stops. in this edition it's on the third page. And there is something a bit awkward there in the writing. Let's say you have the theme in the manual. And in the accompaniment you have this figure. Now in this figure there are some interesting notes, actually, some repeated notes, like here in the second bar. You hear. Now actually, if you do everything what is always written in the scores, and okay, maybe even written by César Franck in his registration, is that the manuals are coupled to each other. Now, if we couple the manuals, then actually it's impossible to hear these repeated notes in the accompaniment because the same note is in the manual. I will try to show it to you how it works. So you have this melody and you have this accompaniment. Now try to hear this with coupled manuals. Yeah, of course you cannot hear this because this La is A is already here. Yeah, you can play it, but there is no sound because it's coupled. So I have this idea for you to keep the manuals in this spot uncoupled. So not to couple the récit to the positive or to the grade. That the grade stays, the grade can be coupled to the positive, yeah? But that you don't get the récit in there. And when you play it like this, uncoupled, then it sounds like this, and actually then you can hear these notes. Listen. I think it's more clear and it gives actually nice effect. And then the next thing you can do, because of course we have to realize that when Franck coupled manuals and in general with mechanical organs, when you couple, for instance, récit to positive, positive to grade, récit will automatically also be coupled to grade. Yeah? So of course it's something we always have to realize when we play on organs with a electrical action or electric coupler action, that when Franck asked couple récit positive, actually he didn't have a coupler from the récit to the grade. So it was always coupled through the positive, couple positive grade, and you have also the récit on the grade. So what you can do after this passage, because then comes this passage like, then you put the coupler of the récit and positive to the grade, and then you have everything together, and also the coupler to the pedals, the récit pedal, because I also would not couple the récit already to the pedal before. Actually, so Franck didn't have also a coupler from the récit to the pedal. He didn't have this Tiras récit pedal. That's one of the ideas in this chorale. And then for the beginning, I would also not couple the récit to the positive. I would play just on the positive, actually as it is marked in the score. By the way, what I also like about the Duruflé edition is you can turn all the pages yourself. You don't need an assistant. Yeah? It's a very practical edition because, of course, Duruflé was also a practical organist, I think, and he made this edition that it's easy for yourself to turn, and he gives some interesting advice. One of the advices he gives, so when you start the beginning, with almost no couplers. What you can do is couple the second manual to the pedals. And then you get this beginning, which actually doesn't sound very bad, even without a récit without a reeds. And then we continue a bit, and then we come to this passage. Duruflé writes in the music to do a bit of poco ritenuto and then to play again a tempo. I will make the change, and Duruflé does the suggestion to add a flute forefoot on the manual. So then you get something like this. I will play a few bars before this passage. Poco ritenuto, and then to add forefoot. And then we come to this passage, we just continue, uncoupled manuals. But we go to the récit. You see, it gives a kind of different kind of interpretation, different kind of expression, but I think it's interesting to try it like this. And I don't think that you will say, oh, we don't hear the theme anymore. I think it's still quite audible. The only thing is, here at this organ, we are just very close with the microphone to the récit. So the récit is quite strong. Actually, I think when you try it, if I would record in the church, you would hear very well the structure of the music. This theme only played on foundation stops, and this accompaniment on soft récit with the reed stops, but close the récit, because the opening of the récit comes later. And then you can clearly hear all the layers in the music, even with the repeated notes. Because even it's not only this repeated notes, but there are also some other notes which actually don't sound anymore if you couple the manuals. So it's just an idea, but I think it can be interesting. Now something else I want to talk to you about is about some registration things. Now, just in general, even this organ and many organs, when you have like a 3-manual organ, even a romantic style of around 40 stops, you don't always have a 4-foot reed on the récit. On this organ we have the trompette, we have the basson hautbois, and we have the voix humaine as a reed stops on the 3rd manual. Of course, we know Franck also had a clairon 4-foot on the récit. And what you can do in this case, in this organ, it works actually. I don't know, you have to try it sometime. To instead, if you want to have an impression of a 4-foot reed, add to the trumpet and the hautbois 8-foot reed, add the voix humaine. You would not think about it maybe to do it because it doesn't, normally it should not fit together. And you use the voix humaine separately only with the tremolant. But actually, because of this very nasal sound, it gives a lot of overtones with the other reed stops, which gives almost the impression that there is a 4-foot reed stop. Now I will try, maybe if you listen, if you can notice the difference. I play a chord just with the reed stops 8 foot, and I will add the voix humaine. Now, of course, you have to make sure that your voix humaine is tuned very well, because that's also often a problem, of course. Now, it's not perfect here, but I think you will get an impression. So I play now the reed stops chord, and I will add the voix humaine. See, I will play some chords now just with this combination of 8 foot reeds and voix humaine. And now without. It's worth to give it a try to see what is the effect, and you will decide if it sounds or it doesn't sound. It's just an idea. In some organs, I know it works. Another thing in this Franck piece is very often you notice actually that Franck uses the pedal without any manual couplers. Even if it's written in the scores like a terrasse, which would mean that because of terrasse of positive, that the swell is also coupled to the pedal. You see clearly in the music that it's not intended this way. Yeah? You have some passages, like for instance here, you can clearly see that the bass notes are doubled. You play them in the manual and on the pedal, although in most of the scores there is written to use pedal coupler. And then it can be one or another thing. Or you don't have to play these low notes anymore in the left hand, but why is it written in the score then? So I think it's mainly intended to keep the pedal separated from the manuals. You have to check the music. You will see that most of the time you can do it without pedal couplers when the notes are doubled in the manual. Of course, for sure, in this passage with the voix humaine, you know, with this 32 foot stop, you also see it in the score. So actually, he wrote the music as if there would be a pedal coupler. But of course, you play the music as it's written and you don't put any pedal coupler. But it's not only in this passage, because also in the passage before, you know this passage? It's everything doubled in the manual. I didn't couple the pedals to the manual, but if there would be a coupler, you're just playing unnecessary things. So that's also another thing. So check very well where the pedal coupler can be left out, and it will not change anything on the music, but the music will become more logical, and I think as Franck intended it, even if it's nowhere in any score. Because of course we have to realize that it was Franck's last pieces. And the only thing he did was to go to Sainte Clotilde to think about some registration for these pieces. But who knows, he might not even really have played these pieces himself. If he would have, he might have come to other conclusions. And of course there are different theories about the registration, different sources. But the thing is, I think you just have to look very often just to the music, and then you will realize, what am I playing with this coupler? Everything is written double. Why? So leave out the coupler. So try to think logically, and also like, okay, is all the music coming out as it was intended? It cannot be the intention of a composer to write notes which actually you cannot hear. So we always have to think for ourselves and play the music, of course, with the historical knowledge we have, but also to use our brain when we are playing. Yeah, about this edition, I'm very happy with this Maurice Duruflé edition of the Franck pieces. It's a very practical edition. Since I have it, I always use it. Thank you for your attention. See you next time.